Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video by the boxing channel known as Boxing Ego. And I thought that I would review this because I thought that this would be a very particularly interesting topic. One that I haven't really talked about for a while, but it is on a fight that could be potentially the biggest fight, or at least, potentially the best matchup between two of the best pound for pound fighters in the world today. And that is going to be between Mr. Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Bud Crawford. And there's been people calling for this fight for a very long time. I actually even wanted to see this fight about 4 years ago, before Terence Bud Crawford, I believe, was even at 147 pounds. And there was even certain debates about who would win the fight at that time. But overall, it is going to be very particularly interesting if and when this fight does happen. I do hope the fight does happen very particularly soon, because I believe that Terence Bud Crawford is about 35, maybe even 36 years of age. So, all in all, it's going to be very particularly interesting to see if this fight does happen soon. It's also going to be very interesting if, just like how the LDBC and new media said with Canelo about how he allegedly beats all these older and washed up opponents, if they're going to say the same thing with Errol Spence Jr. overall when he beats Crawford, or if he beats Crawford, because Crawford is allegedly 36 years old or around there. So it's going to be very interesting, but we all know they're not going to do that. But anyways, the fight is very particularly interesting. Both of these fighters, in my view, are pretty much at the best points in their career. Errol Spence was able to come back very well, in my opinion, against Yordenis Ugas, who isn't necessarily, in my opinion, an A-grade fighter, but maybe you could debate, maybe if you really wanted to, on the A- level, or someone on the know that is at least a good solid B+ fighter. And Errol Spence was overall able to completely, not just dominate Yordenis Ugas, he was able to absolutely thrash him. He was able to punish him basically into submission, or until the point, I believe, where either the referee or the corner actually had to stop it. And Errol Spence has not really looked like that for the past few years. And it could be because of a step up in competition, or it could be, maybe, all in all, because maybe physically he was not the same fighter. Who knows? Maybe a little bit of both. But anyways, Mr. Boxing Ego is going to talk about Mr. Amir Khan's analyzation of the Errol Spence versus Terence Bud Crawford fight overall. And of course, we all know that Amir Khan fought Terence Crawford just a couple of years ago, maybe a few years ago now. And Amir Khan, of course, he overall did end up getting somewhat stopped in that fight. Overall, it was somewhat because of a low blow, but it was counted as a TKO because Amir Khan could not continue on. I was a little bit surprised that it counted as a TKO, but it is what it is. It probably should have went to the scorecards, at least from what I remember, but I would have to look at the rules. I can't necessarily remember. But anyways, Amir Khan more than likely knew, in my view, that eventually he was going to get stopped in that fight. I think that he fought a fighter that he had never seen before in terms of the boxing ability. And Amir Khan has fought a lot of decent fighters. He fought Danny Garcia. He fought, I believe, overall, Mr. Lamont Peterson. He fought Marcos Maidana, when it came down to it. And I think that Terence Crawford was by far the best all-around boxer that Amir Khan had ever fought. And I think he knew that not only was he eventually going to get knocked out, but he basically had no chance to outbox this dude whatsoever. So it's going to be very interesting, his analyzation. But anyway, let's get into it. Let's see what Mr. Ego and what Mr. Amir Khan had to say.
Amir Khan says that Errol Spence is easy work for Terence Crawford. Lego. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Now, link in the description. The question is Spence or Crawford. And Amir Khan says, quote, okay, so I'm going to go with my boy Terence Crawford. Amir Khan says, in that fight, we've seen Errol Spence get caught and get rattled. But with Crawford, no one has ever seen him hurt. He's beaten guys with speed, he's beaten guys with power, and he's beaten guys that were good boxers. He's beaten guys that were good fighters. And so has Spence. I feel that Crawford has the upper hand in the fight. I think it'll go the distance, but I think it'll be easy work for Terence Crawford because he'll just box him. So I see Spence coming at him, running at him, and putting pressure on. One thing about Crawford is
I more than likely see Mr. Errol Spence Jr. being the pressure fighter of the two. And to be quite honest with you, I think that that is the smart idea. Overall, I was talking to a person, I believe, earlier when we were talking about the Canelo Alvarez versus Araceli Lara fight. And he stated all in all that he thought that Lara overall clearly did not win the fight against Canelo. even though there's a certain amount of people that believe that Lara could have won that fight, I'm a personal believer that that fight could have went either way. But what he stated was that, Lara overall was not good enough in the pocket to beat Canelo. Well, excuse me, even though Lara, in my opinion, is actually a little bit of a better inside fighter than what some people give him credit for. The thing is that Lara was not going to be able to go toe to toe with Mr. Canelo Alvarez in that fight or exchange a lot of the times in the pocket. And when it comes to Mr. Errol Spence Jr., he is mainly going to be the fighter that is going to be the main pocket fighter. He is going to have to be the fighter that is going to try to put on the pressure and mainly overall try to somewhat brawl, at least in an intelligent manner. He's going to have to move in and out a little bit here and there, and of course, use his feet and use his movement. But he is going to have to put constant pressure, in my opinion, on Terence Bud Crawford. Because if he tries to outbox Terence Bud Crawford in the middle of the ring, it's not going to end up very well for him. And that's not me stating that Errol Spence Jr. does not have great boxing ability, but you must know your limitations. Just like when it comes to Floyd Mayweather Jr., or just like when it comes to fighters who beat Mike Tyson or fighters who, maybe had a chance against Muhammad Ali. You can't overall try to beat someone overall who's an all-time great fighter, or at least a decently great fighter, at someone all in all at what they're best at, or at least that is very, very rare. It's not going to happen. All right, you can't beat Mike Tyson overall just by completely trying to go in there and outpower him and outslug him. Now, Evander Holyfield was somewhat able to do it, but he was able to do it in an intelligent manner. Errol Spence Jr., he does not have the speed. He does not overall have, I believe, the reach of a Terence Bud Crawford. And Crawford is a little bit faster with not only his hand speed, but also with his footwork. So if Errol Spence Jr. really overall tries, if he tries to outbox Terence Bud Crawford in the middle of the ring, in my opinion, that would not be the best thing for him to do, and it probably would lose him the fight. But it would be very particularly interesting, but I do believe that Spence is going to try to put on pressure, and that's exactly what he should try to do. As for Mr. Terence Bud Crawford, he's going to have to try to use at least his alleged better footwork, or at least his faster footwork, in my opinion, and his faster hand speed. At least it seems like that on the surface. And he's going to have to try to move in and out. He's mainly going to have to try to be the boxer from the inside, while also trying to get Errol Spence a little bit off of him by, creating a body attack and, tying him up here and there when he needs to. And on top of that, pushing him a little bit back here and there when you need to. But Terence Crawford is mainly, in my view, going to have to be on the back foot.
Is good off the back foot. He's a good back foot fighter as well. Me and Crawford did a couple of rounds in a fight and sparred together. One thing about Bud Crawford is what a genuinely nice guy he is. When I was in camp in the mountains, when I left Omaha, Nebraska to Colorado Springs just to be a part of a team, just to help me and go for runs and stuff. He was so much a big help, and then came to the UK with me. Yeah, it was good to have him there. End quote. Now, I gotta be real. Whenever I
That's right. I believe Mr. Amir Khan actually had Terence Bud Crawford in his corner last time, which tells you how much he thinks of probably Brian McIntyre and Mr. Terence Bud Crawford's abilities when it comes down to it. But on top of that, I believe that Terence Crawford was in the corner for Mr. Amir Khan when he got his ass whooped by Kell Brook. I remember that fight. And to be honest with you, had those two fought in their prime, that fight probably would have ended up just as what it did in that fight. Because there's no offense against Amir Khan, but I'm not really sure if Amir Khan was ever truly a real A-grade fighter. He was always looked at as someone that had the highest of potentials, but he was always someone that underwhelmed a little bit more than what he did overachieve in his career. And that's why he ended up losing to certain fighters like a Danny Garcia and like a Terence Bud Crawford in the fashion that he did, and a couple of other ones. Because Amir Khan, even though he was gifted athletically and he did have some sort of boxing skill, he had a lot of holes in his game. He was not good defensively. He had one of the worst chins, if not the worst chin, that I've seen probably for a championship caliber fighter when it comes down to it. And on top of that, he did not overall look out for incoming counters very well. And he would stay in there for way too long overall, throwing way too long of combinations or throwing punches for way too long, anyway, and not moving.
hear a fight breakdown like this, I automatically throw it in the bin. I throw it in the trash can. And I'll explain why. Because when I give you guys my fight predictions and breakdowns, there is nothing personal. In the words of Nino Brown,
Well, I can't necessarily agree with that, Mr. Boxing Ego. When you overall determined, at least overall, who you thought was going to be the Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury winner, or Victor in the trilogy, it was very personal. Javante Tank Davis, when you talk about him, it's very personal. Deontay Wilder, when you talk about him, is very personal. Really, when you talk about a certain amount of fighters that you really, really like, it is a certain amount personal. That's not me saying that you're the worst breakdown analyst that I've ever seen, but a lot of the times your emotion does get in the way of what oftentimes could be a somewhat reasonable analysis, which is a shame, but it is what it is.
In New Jack City, it's nothing personal. It's always business. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, Miss Hawkins. It's always business. It's never nothing personal. When I'm breaking
Well, I can't agree with that with you because we know a lot of the times it is very personal with you, and that's why you try to tear down certain fighters as well as uplift certain fighters who may be on your shit list or overall, certain fighters that may overall be on your quote unquote hope list, I guess, if I wanted to use that term, to steal the term from Dante's Boxing Nation.
down the fights, I don't even look at the fighters. I don't look at their color. I don't look at their age, their gender, their background.
Bullshit. Just stop it. You don't look at their color. Right then, as soon as you said there, the lie detector test went off, beeping all over the place. Just stop. You don't look at their color. Get the fuck out of here. Come on, man. Who are you fooling?
I just give you the real on what I see and who I think is going to win.
Yes, but oftentimes what you see, even though partially logical, it oftentimes is influenced overall by your pro-racial issues and your over-emotionality, just like Dante's Boxing Nation and just like Aki TV. And this is the reason why I like to review their channels, because not every single point that they make is always a bad point. Even 75% of it may be logical, but then the 25% of it could be absolutely ludicrous. Because a lot of these guys have a very big emotional issue and pro-racial issue. And don't get me wrong, a lot of boxing fans and sports fans in general, maybe even people in general, might have somewhat of that issue. But that's why I do this channel, because I think that it's best to be as logical and objective as possible in most categories as possible. We don't have to necessarily be logical 100% of the time, when it comes down to it. Of course, emotion is necessary. But when I'm breaking down a sports thing, when it comes to those type of facts and breaking down who is better and greater and who's accomplished more, I really don't see a reason to bring emotion into the situation.
A lot of people in boxing, fighters, trainers, fans, fanatics, whatever, included, have an extremely difficult time doing that, where putting emotions and personal relationships aside and things like that. Listen,
I would agree, Mr. Boxing Ego, but you also should keep the same energy when it comes to other people giving their analyzations when it clearly seems personal. Anyway.
I'm a big fan of Bud Crawford, big fan of Errol Spence. I got pictures in my phone of
Well, you probably like both fighters, and this is a better fight, or it's a better outcome if Terence Bud Crawford beats Errol Spence, other than someone like if it were a Canelo Alvarez or a Josh Taylor, and I don't think Josh Taylor would ever stand a chance against either of those guys, even though he's a decent fighter. He's just not on the same level as those guys. He's an A minus to A level fighter in my view, and to be quite honest with you, I'm not really even sure if Josh Taylor would 100% beat someone like a Danny Garcia or a Sean Porter. Just not sure if he would. Maybe, but not 100% sure. But anyways, when it comes down to it, all in all, it is very clear that Mr. Ego is more cheering for Errol Spence Jr. than what he is Terence Bud Crawford. And it is what it is. You root for whoever you root for. Who do I personally think is going to win the fight? I think that this fight is very, very close. I think all in all, at first when I heard of this fight, that I was slightly favoring Mr. Errol Spence Jr. Then a little bit after that, I think that I was slightly favoring Mr. Terence Bud Crawford, maybe even 60-40. But after I seen Errol Spence Jr. in that Yordenis Ugas fight, it really is a toss-em-up fight. It really is a very, very interesting fight, because I could easily see Errol Spence Jr.'s chin and his power and his overall slightly probably better defense than Mr. Terence Bud Crawford. I could see that maybe being the edge that gives him the fight over Terence Bud Crawford. And I could also see easily Terence Bud Crawford, with him probably overall having the slightly faster feet, or at least all in all, or probably decently faster feet, maybe slightly better feet, and on top of that, better hand speed, and overall partially a little bit more slickness. I could easily see overall, him winning the fight as well, or getting the slight edge. This is truly a great matchup, because The fighters overall, they're both great all around boxers, but their styles tend to usually be a little bit different. They can both come forward and they can both go backwards to a certain degree. But in this fight, you all know what one of them is supposed to do. And what Errol Spence Jr. has to do, in my view, is put on the pressure. And what Terence Bud Crawford has to do is to be on the back foot. That's why I compared this all in all to a smaller version of Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler. Anyway.
Both of them, or with both of them, right? Nothing, there's no love lost. It's a 50-50 fight on paper. I'm not mad at it. The reason why I'm so quick to discount Amir Khan is because the inherent bias. Like, listen to the stuff he's saying. Like, if you're breaking down the fight, he's saying, oh, he's such a nice guy, which that's probably true. Terrence.
Well, that's understandable, Mr. Eagle, but Mr. Amir Khan, when it comes down to it, some of the points that he made up, or I won't say made up, excuse me, because I make it seems like false or something like that, or falsified. But some of the points that he made up, or excuse me, some of the points that he brought up, excuse me, I thought overall were decent, but I can't necessarily agree with every single point. Do I believe that Terence Bud Crawford is the slicker fighter and is the better fighter on the back foot, or at least the more talented fighter on the back foot? Yeah, probably. But I can't necessarily agree with Amir Khan where he says or brings up the point that he's never seen Terence Bud Crawford hurt before. I've seen Terence Bud Crawford hurt quite a few. Well, I won't say quite a few, but a few times. I've seen him hurt against Yuriorkis Gamboa. I've seen him hurt a little bit against Aegis Kavalauskas. And I believe there was even another fighter. Oh, Felix Diaz. I've seen him a little bit hurt against Felix Diaz as well. So Terence Bud Crawford is going to have to tighten up that defense a little bit, and especially watch out for Errol Spence Jr.'s pressure in that fight. It's going to be very particularly interesting.
Crawford seems like a cool dude to just kick it with or be around. He seems hospitable. But that has nothing to do with the breakdown. So if you're being asked about why he beats...
I would agree with you, Mr. Ego. You should remember that the next time that you try to break down a Deontay Wilder fight or a Gervonta Tank Davis fight. I agree with you. But, overall, there's a saying, you never usually trust someone who never practices what they preach.
And you're saying stuff like he's a genuinely nice guy. Like, I don't even want to hear that in a fight prediction. You know what I'm saying? I would give a complete fight, me personally. I'm just telling you me. I would give a complete fight breakdown and then maybe go on about how he's a nice guy, but I wouldn't intertwine the two. And then the opening words from Amir Khan in this interview is, okay, so I'm going to go with my boy. So anytime people are saying...
That's a fair point.
Stuff like my boy and things like that, I can't really expect you to...
A house or a laptop? Which one do you think is worth more? Well, definitely not the house, because it not only costs millions to...
And things like that, I can't really expect you to give an honest assessment. Like, here's an example, just to give you guys a great example, because I'm the king of analogies. I'm the king of boxing talk, and this is what I do. Imagine if you were in court and you were fighting a ticket from a police officer and the police officer showed up and then the judge said, oh, I'm just going to trust my boy. And he said he was personal friends with that peace officer, that specific police officer that wrote you the ticket. Would you feel like you were going to get a fair trial or a fair, they're going to hear your case fairly if the judge, even knowing, having this relationship with this cop, and the friendship outside of work, they're saying, oh, yeah, Officer Johnson, that's my boy, if they said stuff like that? I mean, I know me.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying there, Mr. Ego, but I also did review a video by you a few days ago where you talked about the Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Tank Davis fight, and you were talking about the multitude of boxers who stated that Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis more than likely would beat Ryan Garcia. And if you're going to use that there, then one would think that maybe you should use that for the Terence Bud Crawford fight. But that's why, that's why that's a little bit dangerous. Because I understood his point to a degree, what he was trying to make in the video. But you have to be very careful, because just because 9 out of 10 people say something doesn't make it true. And oftentimes, the more someone says something, the more true, whether it's, true or false, the more true it oftentimes becomes, to many people, because they pretty much just believe whatever the hell they hear. So you have to be very careful with that. But I do understand where Boxing Ego is coming from in that video, because these are boxers, and they overall kind of know what they see, at least to a degree. Now, not every boxer is a great breakdown artist, but it is what it is. However, what I will say is this: if you want to go by that point, most professional boxers have actually picked Terence Bud Crawford to win the fight. Not just Amir Khan. Roy Jones Jr., I believe, picked him to win the fight. I believe Floyd Mayweather Jr. maybe even potentially picked him to win the fight. I believe that there was a couple of others. Freddie Roach, I even potentially believe, picked Terence Bud Crawford to win the fight. Now, maybe one would say that Freddie Roach, that he's a little bit more biased because one of the fighters that he trained in, Victor Postal, for that fight, he ended up getting completely embarrassed by Terence Bud Crawford. But, it is what it is. There's a lot of people that have been interviewed. Sean Porter, now, to be fair, Sean Porter also apparently is, he's been a friend of Terence Bud Crawford for a very long time, allegedly. Anyway, but,
Personally, I don't know how you guys think, but I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. I would feel like, oh man, I have no chance of winning this case. He just said the cop is his boy. You know what I'm saying? So when I see people intertwine, say, oh, this guy's a nice guy and, he has a nice house and his wife always treats me with respect, things that don't really have nothing to do with the actual fight, it's hard for me to even include that into an actual breakdown. The other thing that really stood out, because I really do this and I really like break down the fights and give you guys my best, is he says he feels Crawford has the upper hand in the fight and it'll go the distance, but he also said it'll be easy work. So if you're in front of Errol Spence for 12 rounds, Errol Spence has heart. So if it's not a knockout and the fight goes the distance, I don't really see how keeping Errol Spence off of you for 12 rounds would be classified as easy work. But
well, right, but I think all Amir Khan is really trying to say here is that Errol Spence, he's good enough overall to probably survive the fight. He has a good chin, and all in all, maybe his slightly bigger stature will keep him in the fight. But I think all he's really saying is that he believes that Terence Crawford will completely embarrass him and outbox him. I think that's really all he's trying to say. Now, could you maybe argue that Amir Khan, that, he is being a little bit biased here? I think that maybe you could argue it for a couple of reasons. He did say overall, as Mr. Boxing Ego said, my boy. But I think Mr. Amir Khan, I think he's also so mesmerized by Mr. Terence Bud Crawford because certain fighters are certain overall. If you take a look at basketball teams, like if you hear Isaiah Thomas overall back from the 80s of the old, Detroit Bad Boy Pistons, when you hear him talk about Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics, because they were a part of their, individual conference, while the LA Lakers were a part of the opposite and Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls came a little bit later on. Isaiah Thomas talks about Larry Bird like he's the greatest player of all time. If you were to ask Isaiah Thomas behind closed doors, he may tell you, he probably, hell, even in front of, open doors, in front of the whole, crowd, he'd probably tell you that Larry Bird was the best all-around player that he ever played and the smartest player that he ever played. That's Isaiah Thomas's words. Now, most people, of course, would put Magic Johnson, would put Magic Johnson and overall Michael Jordan above Larry Bird. But Isaiah Thomas, in his mind, he takes a look at Larry Bird within the time that he got as probably the best peak player that he ever personally played. And that was the reason overall. The reason for that was because Isaiah Thomas got beat overall in a certain amount of times by the Boston Celtics, I believe, or at least a couple of times in that of the Eastern Conference. It just is what it is. Amir Khan may have a little bit of that slight bias with Terence Bud Crawford because when he got beat by Terence Bud Crawford, he said, wow, I've never really been outboxed like this before. Even when I lost my past fights against Lamont Peterson, which was a bit controversial, or when I lost to Danny Garcia, I was probably winning the fight until I got knocked out. I couldn't even land a punch on this guy. And this dude was completely hurting me, and he was completely outboxing me. So I think Amir Khan, even though to a degree, I understand what Mr. Boxing Ego is stating, but do I believe that Amir Khan believes that Crawford is going to outbox Errol Spence? Yes, I do.
And more, apparent in what he said outside of the easy work is he literally said that Terence Crawford, no one has ever seen him hurt. So when I hear fighters or trainers say stuff like this, and then I can immediately find moments where what you just said is not true, then it's hard for me to really take your fight breakdown or prediction seriously because as a matter of fact,
well, I would somewhat agree with that. And that is really the point to where you kind of do throw that in the, out the window or in the garbage, in my opinion, when it comes to Mr. Amir Khan, because Terence Bud Crawford has been hurt a multitude of times. Now, he's never been knocked out, and officially, I believe he's never even been knocked down, even though, in my opinion, he very clearly was knocked down in that Aegis Kavalauskas fight. When Aegis Kavalauskas hit him hard with a good right, and Terence Crawford tried to cling onto him, but then he fell. In my opinion, that was a clear knockdown. But, kudos to Terence Crawford. I think he underestimated him a little bit. And then all in all, he ended up getting the knockout a little bit later on. But no, I've seen Crawford hurt. So the big question is, can Terence Bud Crawford take on good power like Errol Spence? Because Errol Spence doesn't just have good power, he has extraordinary power. Like, he reminds me of Miguel Cotto, maybe a little bit less than what Miguel Cotto had for the welterweight division. For those of you that don't remember, Miguel Cotto for the welterweight division, he had an absolute sledgehammer of a left hook, and all in all, he had great power in both hands.
I have seen Crawford hurt. The Gamboa fight, he was hurt. I think he even got buzzed in the Thierry Jean fight. He was definitely hurt in the.
I don't necessarily remember the Thierry Jean fight that much. I remember that one Canadian fighter. Maybe he did get hurt. I don't know. But one fight that a lot of people don't mention all that much, I believe that Terence Bud Crawford was actually hurt a little bit against Felix Diaz. Because Terence Crawford was starting to keep his hands way too low. He was starting to brawl with him a little bit more than what he probably should have. And Felix Diaz was a very good inside fighter when it came down to it. And Terence Crawford let him get off a couple of hits. And I believe Felix Diaz hit him with a good overhand right. Or maybe it was a hook. I can't remember. But Crawford looked like he stumbled a little bit and that he was backing up.
Aegis Kavalauskas Mean Machine, Lean Green Foreman Grilling Machine fight, right? So
I agree.
to say that he's never been hurt, that's crazy. Because
However, what I will state about Mr. Terence Bud Crawford is this. Sometimes certain boxers, almost every great boxer, rises to the occasion. When you take a look at Floyd Mayweather Jr., for example, he did not look extraordinarily well against either Marcos Maidana or Jose Luis Castillo, to the point to where he actually rematched overall to prove a point that he could have performed better than what he did in that first fight. And those fighters, in my opinion, were very decent fighters, but I wouldn't say that they're all-time great. But Floyd Mayweather Jr. against Miguel Cotto and against Manny Pacquiao and overall against Canelo Alvarez, probably the greatest fighters that he ever fought. He put on better performances usually against those fighters because he was able to rise to the occasion and he took them that much more seriously. When I seen Terence Bud Crawford against Sean Porter, even when he was getting hit a little bit, and his defense is going to have to tighten up a little bit, in my opinion, because sometimes he keeps his hands down way too much, even though his defense will get better as the fight goes along. But he may not get that opportunity against Errol Spence, because Errol Spence can hurt you with even just one good punch. So Crawford's going to have to really watch out. And I'm not quite sure if he has an A-grade chin. His chin almost reminds me of Deontay Wilder. He can take a punch, and he has a lot of heart. He has a lot of dog and grit, but he can be hurt. And he does need to keep his hands up more. So it will be particularly interesting. But Terence Bud Crawford, one thing I'll give him credit for is when I seen him in the biggest challenge of his life against Sean Porter, he was able to completely embarrass him in some of those latter rounds. And even some of the hits that he did take, he took very well.
if you actually watch Bud Crawford, I mean, you have to understand, there's different severities of being hurt, and there's also guys that get hurt and then know how to react and then respond. Crawford for sure is a dog, and Crawford for sure is a total champion. So
Well, it's not just that Terence Bud Crawford has a lot of dog in him. And Mr. Ego always brings up that point. He brought it up with Anthony Joshua. And I already told people why he kind of brought that up with Mr. AJ. Because once again, their goal is to try to make Deontay Wilder look as best as possible in 10 years' time, or however many years' time. These guys are going to allege, all in all, that Deontay Wilder was truly the best heavyweight of his era. He just got cheated out of that, and we all know that's bullshit. But it is what it is, at least for those of us that, actually have a brain. But anyways, when it comes down to it, when it comes to Mr. Terence Bud Crawford, he is a very, very decent boxer, but he is going to have to make certain adjustments against Errol Spence Jr. But the thing is about Terence Crawford is that not only overall does he have a lot of dog in him, but he just has the boxing IQ. When you take a look at someone like an Anthony Joshua or an Adrian Broner, in my view, it's not necessarily that they don't overall have a certain amount of dog in them. It's just that when they get to a certain level, they don't really know what to do. So it gives them a lack of confidence. And that's pretty much almost with any athlete. Now, are there certain athletes that do quit overall, when the going gets rough? Absolutely. But when it comes down to it, certain times, all in all, maybe it may not be necessarily quitting. It just may be, I don't necessarily know what to do against this guy because this guy is bringing it to a level that I have never seen before or that I don't know how to get to.
Has been hurt, and those times where he has been hurt, he's remained undefeated because he shows you he's a dog and he's willing to take it there. But that doesn't change the basic statement you said that he has never been hurt because Crawford figured it out in being hurt. That's like saying Floyd Mayweather didn't get hurt versus Shane Mosley. That's incorrect. This is inaccurate information.
I would agree with that.
The fact that Floyd won like 11 rounds has no bearing on the fact that he truly was hurt in the second round of that specific fight. So if we're going to, break down fights, I would expect people to know these things. It's not that Crawford overcame and, stopped some of these guys like Mean Machine or whatever. It's the fact that he was hurt in the fight. You just said he was never hurt. So kind of hard for me to really seriously kind of respect this fight breakdown from Amir Khan. That's just my own honest personal opinion. Like, even when Amir Khan was talking about Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia, I could relate to what he was saying because he was breaking down attributes from both fighters. And he was highlighting what Tank does. Like, if he said that Tank is, extremely tall, and then I'm like, hey, no, he's not, then I would disagree. But the stuff he was saying in that particular breakdown.
Well, I would somewhat agree, Mr. Boxing Eagle, but a lot of certain boxing opinions, at least overall in certain people's minds, is that of speculative, or overall they believe that it's relative, that, their opinion is factual, but, everyone is going to look at a certain fighter differently. And that's that's why overall, it's hard for me to respect some of these channels because, listen, everything is somewhat speculative to a certain degree, to where we all can have a little bit of opinions. But when you see something that is very, very clear because of repeated results, then we have to basically go off the logical equation that this person just has overall a certain amount of greatness about them. And this is why usually a lot of the times I cannot respect a certain amount of the breakdowns by that of the LDBC and new media. Really, I don't trust anyone's breakdowns. I trust a very few amount of channels or very few amount of people out there with their breakdowns. Because the majority of people out there are not logical. But this is why I do not trust these channels the majority of the time. Because they try to tear down Tyson Fury or Canelo or certain fighters that they don't like on a constant basis. And they will try to tear down overall Canelo and all these guys and say, oh yeah, well, he's a good fighter, but the only reason why he's that high in the rankings is because he has the complexion for the protection. Canelo is someone that has repeated results. So what that tells me is that you're letting your emotions get in the way. So, as Mr. Ego states here, I agree with the majority of what he says, but let's keep the same standards because a lot of the times you let your emotions get in the way as well.
But see, and here's the thing, herein lies the problem. To my knowledge, he doesn't have like a interpersonal relationship with either Ryan Garcia versus Tank. So that's what you get in boxing. Sometimes you have fighters that have these personal relationships, so they can't give an unbiased breakdown because they don't want to, offend a friend or whatever the case is. So for me, I just prefer people to keep it real in the breakdown. And if you're so connected to the fighters, probably don't say anything. You know what I mean? Or just say.
I would agree. You should have kept that same energy on the Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury trilogy because you were over emotional for that fight, and that's why you got that fight prediction so wrong.
I'm picking this person and don't bother to break it down because when you bother to break it down, if you're not being truthful, then that stuff will come up. Like to say that Crawford has never been hurt, I mean, that's inaccurate information. And I can show you the specific rounds where he's been hurt, right? And then he highlighted the fact that he said Errol Spence has been rattled. I mean, the mouthpiece with Ugas, I guess, if that's considered rattled. Let me know how I did in this video. SLC, subscribe, like, and comment. I'm the best in the business. Introducing.
What the hell was that last part? Anyway, but all in all, I thought that was a very particularly interesting video. Not only to get down overall to the breakdown of this fight, in my view, once again, and to get Amir Khan's perspective, but also to get Mr. Boxing Ego's perspective. I actually believe that Mr. Boxing Ego, yes, overall I do criticize a lot of his commentary on my channel, but I think that he is somewhat of a talented breakdown artist. He overall can be someone that breaks down fights very decently well, but unfortunately, excuse me, he lets his emotion and the pro-racial agenda that he usually tries to push get in the way. When it comes to overall people like Aki TV and Dante's Boxing Nation, I can't really tell if they're being serious or not with some of the shit they say, because some of the shit that they say is almost so demented or so stupid to the point to where it's like, were you literally paid to say that? But when it comes to Mr. Boxing Ego, you can tell that a lot of the points that sometimes he makes, that they're somewhat logical, but unfortunately he lets his emotion oftentimes get too much in the way with certain fighters. But anyways, that's really about it for today. I just thought that that'd be very particularly interesting. But I do agree with some of the points that Mr. Ego stated. I also agree with some of the points that Mr. Amir Khan stated. I can't agree that I've never seen Terence Bud Crawford hurt, but I could see overall where he's coming from. But it should be a very interesting fight and equation. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Hopefully we get the fight later on this year. If not, maybe all in all, another big fight can happen with Terence Bud Crawford. I don't know which one, but we'll have to see what happens. And for Mr. Errol Spence Jr. as well. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.